is where it looks like we're in good shape. I do expect Tanya to join us. She is not in the waiting room yet, so hopefully we will hear from her in just a moment.
Hello?
Well, we would have waited for a while. Thanks for being responsive to the text message. We do have one public attendee. Stephen Watts is attending this evening, so I will let him in, and I think that we'll be ready to get the meeting going.
Very good. Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good to see everybody. Good to see some new faces.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
exciting.
Okay. Are we good, Brandon?
I believe we're good to go.
Okay, very good. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. Why don't we quickly do some introductions, and when we get to our new members, which welcome, both Marie Taylor and Jennifer Robinson, so good to have you here. When we get to you all, if you wouldn't mind spending a little time helping us get to know you a little bit, that would be great, okay? So Tanya Salvini, chairperson. I live in Lawrence, of course, and I'm at Haskell Indian Nation University. Sanjay, do you want to go next? Yeah.
Sanjay Mishra. I've been a Lawrence resident for about 32 years now, 31, and I am with the University of Kansas and business school there. Thank you.
Jane?
Hello, I'm Jane Gibson. I am also at the University of Kansas in the Department of Anthropology. And I'm a board member. And welcome to Marie and Jenny. It's great to have you with us.
Very good. Stephanie?
Hello, I'm Stephanie Littleton. I'm currently with Allstate Insurance as a project lead consultant. Been there about 20 some years. Prior years, I was on the Lawrence Police Department, and I've been in Lawrence 15 plus years. So welcome to you both.
And Stephanie is the vice chair as well. Brandon?
Yes, I'm Brandon McGuire. I'm an assistant city manager. I've been working with the city for a little bit over 6 years now in the manager's office. I'm also proud to say that I was born and raised here in Lawrence.
Good. Bill, I'm sorry.
All right, I'm Bill Graybill, board member. Welcome to the board.
Okay, very good. Toni?
Good evening. I'm Toni Wheeler. I work for the City of Lawrence. I've worked with the city for 21 years as of this past Saturday, and I am an attorney. I'm the city attorney. Welcome.
And let's go with Jenny then.
Hi, my name is Jenny Robinson. I graduated in May with my MSW from KU. Before that, I worked at the Lawrence Community Shelter as a case manager. And I'm going to be starting a job at Heartland Community Health Center here in town. So very passionate about working within my own community.
Very good. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Marie?
Hi, my name is Marie Taylor. I've lived in Lawrence now for 8 years. And for the past 6 years, I've been at KU as an attorney in their Office of General Counsel. I've been a lawyer for 18 years. I started off in Texas. I lived in Texas before I came to Kansas. And I was an attorney for an appellate court doing criminal and civil appeals, assisting a judge. And then I worked for as an assistant city attorney for the city of El Paso, Texas, which is a over 80% Latino city. So it's quite different from Lawrence. But that was a great experience learning how to just live in my community and serve my community. And so I've been fortunate to be able to do public sector work, and I'm really glad to be part of this board. And I guess other things about me, I have 2 kids, and they're going to be at LHS. So.
Good. Well, welcome.
Thanks.
And Trent?
Hi, I'm Trent McKinley. I'm with the Lawrence Police Department. I've worked here just 4 months shy of 30 years. And just for background, Stephanie and I were in the same recruit academy in January of 1991. So we do know each other from that experience.
Okay, and then is there anyone there in the audience, Brandon?
No, there is not. I stand corrected. We do have Sergeant Dave Ernst.
Oh, okay, good. Sergeant Ernst, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Kurt, is this microphone okay? Yes. Hey, hello, I'm Sergeant Dave Ernst. I've been with the department over 18 years. I've lived in Lawrence since just around 2000, and just like to also say thank you and welcome to the new board members.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, and then I think we're ready to get started. Is that correct? I hope I haven't left anyone out. I don't have everyone up on my screen. In getting started, Brandon, would you mind going ahead and doing the opening with the disclaimer regarding virtual meetings?
Yes, thank you. So for our new board members and members of the public, this is a disclaimer that we've been reading since we've started conducting our meetings virtually as a result of the pandemic. And it just provides some guidelines for the meeting procedures and how to provide comment in a way that complies with the Kansas Open Meetings Act. So I want to provide a few reminders to ensure that during the COVID-19 provisions, we do comply with the COMA. Board members and other meeting participants must state their names and titles each time they speak. Various members of city staff are present, as you've seen, via Zoom and in person in attendance. They must also state their name and title each time they speak. All motions of the board will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, the chair will call on board members individually to provide their vote. The chair will announce whether or not the motion carried, as well as the count of the vote. The agenda for this meeting provided instructions for how to submit public comment and how it would be handled. Written public comment should have been received by the posted deadline prior to the meeting. We did not receive any written public comment, but we did receive a request, and Mr. Stephen Watts is on the meeting this evening to provide public comment. The chair will call for in-person public comment for those without access to technology options. If somebody does show up, Madam Chair, I will let you know. Staff present will direct anybody who is in attendance from the public to the podium to speak following social distancing and safety protocols. And then finally, I would just like to remind everyone to please mute themselves when they are not speaking.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and go on our agenda to item A, public comment.
Would you like for me to begin, ma'am?
Yes, please. I want to recognize Stephen Watts. Thank you.
Hi, I am Stephen Watts. I'm a resident of Lawrence and have been here for quite some time. And I'm thrilled that the board has actually been acting and working. I see that the board was given a charge by the ceremonial mayor, Ms. Ananda, to do several things above and beyond the call of the board. Some of those have been addressed in the paper that Ms. Gibson Carpenter, I don't know the name. Is it Carpenter, Gibson Carpenter? Want to be sure about the names. I've had an opportunity to review that material and I sent some of those remarks into you all. They have some merit. What's not being addressed, however, is the reality that the mayor charged you with identifying specifically choke holds and the use of same by the Lawrence Police Department. Choke holds and carotid artery holds. And there was no opinion on that was provided by your group, and I understand that. But they're still using that as an excuse not to act. Just on Tuesday, Black Lives Matter came to the Down Commission meeting and asked about choke holds and was advised that this group, the Citizens Review Board, would be reviewing that. But I didn't see it reviewed in the document. In the material that I sent to the group, I was very open in terms of what I see as the future for this kind of a board in this community. I'm doing that in the spirit of friendship first and competition second, because I don't know where any of you stand. What I do know that in this group of people, all of you are making over $100,000 per year, and you do not represent the people that are being arrested or the people that are going to jail. I'd like you to think about that. I don't have anything else to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. We appreciate your comments. And I do read your emails. Thank you. Okay, is there any response at this time? Any other comments? Thank you again, Mr. Watts. I do believe, I just want to say that I do believe some of those issues may be addressed in the future. The work that we're doing right now is fundamentally and foundationally critical to where we go in our future. So I just want to make that comment in response. Let's go ahead and start with our agenda item number 1 under B, agenda items. We had just a little history here. We had a working group that put together a draft, a working document, in fact, of ordinance number 9324. And what I'd like to do to approach this work that we're going to do tonight is to have a member of the group give a summary of your considerations, your thought processes, and some items that you that perhaps drove you in the direction that you went in the working document. And then secondly, I would like to go to the red line document after the summary is presented. And I'd like to go page by page in that red line document. And I would like for the group to walk us through that, okay? If that would be acceptable with you all in terms of process. Any comments or concerns or other ideas?
Hi, this is Marie Taylor, board member. So I just, for the board to know that I did my homework and try to keep up with you all, going back and listening to past meetings and tuning in again to rewatch city commission meetings to see what was stated and reading through minutes. And so I hope that I can contribute to the discussion. And I guess I just wanted to lay out maybe we could talk about it conceptually as opposed to going line by line first, because I think that could kind of drive how we review the document. And so for me, I thought about it in 3 kind of big categories of where we provide access, where we need transparency in the process, and where we can have accountability. And so I kind of looked at it, the whole process through that lens. So my comments will be kind of looking at how my comments fit into those big kinds of conceptual categories as we walk through and where we could do better, basically on all those categories. And so as I look through the document, that's what I was thinking about. Where can we provide more access? Where can we be more transparent? And where can we have more accountability, both as a board and for law enforcement agency?
Okay, very good. Thank you. So with that comment, what I think I'll do is backtrack a little and go with the summary first, and then have a conversation conceptually about those 3 categories, the accessibility, the transparency, and the accountability, which I think are in fact terms that we maybe springboarded the conversation back in June. So I'm glad to hear those. And then we'll maybe dive into areas that we'll want to look at throughout the document, okay? All right, so of the working group, and I do want to recognize that working group again at this meeting, and that would be Jane Gibson, board member Jane Gibson, Bill Graybill, and Stephanie Littleton. And thank you again for your work in preparing it for this meeting today. So who would like to provide the summary? Jane, thank you.
I'm glad to do that, unless Bill or Stephanie would like to do it. I've made some notes, but I don't want to usurp anything that they have in mind to do. So I guess I'll go ahead if I don't see Bill and Stephanie stepping in, but please do chime in, Bill and Stephanie, if I'm missing the boat here or leaving something out. And I just want to say thank you to Marie. It's fabulous that you read it carefully. I think that we attempted to address those same issues of accessibility, transparency, and accountability. And the summary that I present will really just be this kind of broad summary of what we saw as the things that we thought we ought to change. The goal here was to change the ordinance in ways that we thought would better enable the CPRB to promote or improved community police relations. So that was the spirit, I think, that we undertook this project of revision in. First I'll say that we preserved some things in the original, and that was there's a list of charges, and we preserved all of those and focused mainly on the issue of police misconduct and the review of complaints. That was really where we put most of our energy. So the other charges are, they're the same as they were originally in the document. In the area of police misconduct, I'd say that we broadened the scope of the kinds of complaints that the board would hear. And we changed the point at which the board would get involved in a complaint, so that we are involved much earlier in the process. We adjusted the procedures to accomplish these charges. There are the changes with regard to the complaints. And in the spirit of transparency and providing the CPR as possible, and this is a phrase that actually came out of the original ordinance, we also modified the document as it applied to the question of redactions. And we changed the ways that the CPRB can respond to the Office of Professional Accountability's investigation. So, for example, again, in the same spirit of trying to assure that the board has adequate information, we wrote in that we could ask for more information instead of trying to circumscribe what we could know. We want to be able to ask for more information if we need it. And we want to be able to recommend an independent investigator. The one thing that seemed to be missing was the independence of investigation of complaints. We changed the qualifications for being on the CPRB. We eliminated a few categories there. And we increased the size of the CPRB to 9. Which was something that the board had previously voted to do, and we were asked by the City Commission to delay that request when we would be able to present them the entire package of the ordinance revision. So here it is. And the point of increasing the size of the board was to be able to do the kinds of work that the City Commission has charged us to do, and that would be things like addressing policing policies. And here we would have issues raised by the woman at the City Commission meeting on Tuesday and Mr. Watts this evening about excessive force. That would be a time when the board would take that up. And also things about education, outreach, and communications. That's another category that the City Commission charged us to address. And the methods by which citizens can file complaints. And then finally, the thing that we spent most of our time on in this revision, the review of the complaint investigations. So I'll turn to Stephanie and Bill and ask if there's anything that you think we should add to the kind of larger summary of the changes that we made, and say that I look forward to the discussion.
This is Bill Graybill, board member. I think you covered it quite well, Jane, from my standpoint.
Yeah, I do agree, Jane. You had quite a comprehensive list from top to bottom. Nothing's coming to mind that really stands out. You hit really all of it. We do, unfortunately, we have a flow chart that Bill Graybill made a wonderful flow chart, and we forgot to include that in this meeting tonight in the documents, which would be very beneficial to see, have that visual. So we'll make sure we have that for the next meeting, so you can have a good visual to go with it. But thanks, Jane.
May I? Tanya, may I?
Hi, sorry. This is Tanya, chair of the board. If everyone could have the red-lined document in front of them, that would be helpful going forward. Does everyone have a copy? Okay. Jane, your summary, in your summary, you discussed the changes, and I think one of the primary things that I noticed in going through the document, at least that I'd like to spend some time talking about, which really a couple of things, and one of them is certainly in the area of transparency and perhaps accountability, and that is adding those additional responsibilities, and that's specifically under specific duties of the board. The board shall, one, and that's on page 2. And I was wondering, because that's one of the primary changes, and I was just wondering if we could, as a board, discuss that. And in that, especially number 1, it increases the duties by including the excessive use of force and other policing practices alleged in community member complaints. So that's one of the primary changes, and I do think that reflects some of what we've talked about with regard to our past conversations, and I just wanted to open it up for conversation, discussion at this time, if anyone has any comments. No?
Marie's ready to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess Marie Taylor, board member. Okay. So I guess I want to go back a step further onto the first page when we think about the definition and distinguishing between the definition of what I feel like the purpose is, and I don't want to lose, as we do the edits, I don't want to lose the center of this, which is the racial and other bias-based policing. So I understand, like, in the way that we define additional kinds of interactions with the police that we want to focus on and scrutinize a bit, you know, that it's still about looking for solving a social ill that we see in our society with racial, you know, now called racial or other bias-based policing, but what I grew up knowing is racial profiling.
Right.
And so as we make this definition and we're looking at other kinds of actions, I don't want to lose that as the center and the focus of our work. That's my opinion there. Not so that we're looking at different kinds of actions, but still going back and looking at the questions of how people are being treated who've been marginalized in our society. So, and then I had one more kind of a technical question on the sending things to KSC post. If the state has a different definition than we do for the bias-based policing, and we've added in sexual orientation and gender identity, if we as a board say we're going to send those cases to, or encourage people to send those cases to them, and it's not in the definition, is that problematic? Are they not going to get the kind of scrutiny of their cases and complaints because of that? I don't know what happens at that state level versus what would happen locally. So I don't want to lose that aspect too of what we may have broader protection. So that's my kind of questions from the first page.
Okay.
Tanya, I believe we're having audio problems on your end.
Okay, I'm sorry. Jane, go ahead.
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Jane, would you go ahead? I saw your hand up, and Jenny as well.
Jane Gibson, board member. I thought I would maybe address the first point that Marie makes and leave it to Bill and Stephanie, if either of you would like to talk about the Kansas C Post issue. The reason that we broadened the scope beyond bias-based policing is that the issue of excessive force doesn't necessarily arise from bias. And it's not like we have information about what the police are doing, but we do recognize that across the country that excessive force is an issue. And in this community, we wanted to be able to represent this community if excessive force is being used against anyone, regardless of whether the motivation arises from bias on this list. So that's why we broadened the scope there, thinking not that bias-based policing was not still hugely important to us. It is. In fact, that is the issue that's probably given rise to maybe the more visible and audible presence of CPRBs across the country is bias-based policing. So as you can see, that is still the embedded and centralized in the definition of what we do. But in this community, to leave out excessive force or other complaints by community members that don't arise out of bias is to mean that the police there is no oversight by the community of anything other than. So we wanted to open up that possibility and have representation for other kinds of complaints. I don't know if that answers, I hope that answers your question. And Bill and Stephanie may have other views of that as well.
My name is Jenny Robinson, board member. I wanted to bring up, I see it mentioned, racial and other forms of biases. And I think that, I don't know, it kind of hits me the wrong way, especially when we see, classism, sexism coming into biases as well, to just be naming the racial biases. That makes me a little bit uncomfortable, especially when we have such controversial interactions with our homeless community here in Lawrence, and they might not have as strong a voice as other people in town. And so I think that might be important to keep in mind.
So you're recommending this consideration of class or status?
Yeah.
Not class, but socioeconomic status.
Mm-hmm.
Marie Taylor, board member. That's what I was going to say, to suggest that term as well.
Okay. Okay, and did Toni or Ms. Wheeler or Sergeant Ernst want to also address that question earlier? And who oversees the Kansas Sea Post? Is that a nonprofit, or is that under the Attorney General's office, or clarification there?
Attorney General's office.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
This is Toni. Kansas Sea Post.
Go ahead.
I mean, an answer about Kansas Sea Post, or was that Toni? I apologize.
No, more specifically about Marie's question earlier, if we're not, just to make sure that the Sea Post is as inclusive as we are in this ordinance.
So Sea Post is the certification body for law enforcement. That is their sole function. I think more what you're referring to is complaints of racial or other bias-based policing can be made with the Attorney General's office, and specific to only that topic. So if somebody had a different type of complaint about police conduct in Lawrence, other than racial or other bias-based policing, then that could not be made at the AG's office. But CPOST is the certification body of law enforcement, and they would deal with if an officer leaves under suspicious circumstances or is terminated, they would then investigate an officer's certification status at that time.
Sure. So thank you, Sergeant Ernst. I think the question more specifically was, are the protected classes that we define in our ordinance also, are they in harmony or consistent with the states. Is that correct, Marie?
That's going to be one we'll have to check back with what's in our ordinance and what is defined in state statute. I don't know that off the top of my head. And there's,
Toni?
I think.
Oh, I'm
Toni
sorry.
Wheeler, City Attorney. I can relay to the board that the state of Kansas, the Anti-Discrimination Act that the state of Kansas has, does not have the protected classes of sexual orientation or gender identity. That is unique to Lawrence and a couple of other a few other municipalities in the state of Kansas. At one time, there was an executive order when Governor Sebelius was governor, but it was later repealed by a subsequent governor that extended some protections along those lines for state employees. But currently, state law does not extend the number of protected classes that the Lawrence ordinances have.
Yeah.
Yes. Sanjay?
Sanjay Mishra, board member. So I was going to ask of the working group is what was the rationale to bring KC Post into play, KSC Post into play? Because if we take that off, because that inconsistency will be there, so half the appeals will not go, and you'll have limited hearing, or I'm not sure that these are even the right body where the appeal should go.
This is Bill Graybill. I think I can answer your first question about what the impetus put that in there. It was in the former ordinance, so we just left it in. I think what's important to keep in mind before we get bogged down on this is that's a simple alternative. If it doesn't work, they'll have to come back through the City of Lawrence mechanism. But I doubt that that gets used as a first alternative by most people. They're going to either take it to the police department or they're going to bring it to this board. That C-post, we could take it out, but it was in the former ordinance, and it's a simple alternative. It isn't mandatory.
Okay, are there any recommendations then in that section that anyone would like to make?
Marie Taylor, board member, sorry for throwing you off for a loop on that one. I think it comes up later on as well, so we can wait. But I think that in my mind, if we can just be cognizant of that, it might not be as well-rounded a remedy for folks to turn to, and they may be more beneficial for them to have their complaints heard locally.
Very good, thank you. Okay, yes, Bill?
I do have a question for Toni on the third part of that paragraph. Do you see anything, or are you aware of any statutory authority that would prohibit Lawrence from expanding the police review board duties from simply discriminatory regulation to the broader base, including excessive force and other complaints?
This is Toni Wheeler, City Attorney. Staff this evening was hopeful to hear some information from this board and go through the ordinance. We do plan to go through it in greater detail after we've heard sort of what your intentions were and what your goals were. So, I think we are certainly able to look at that, and I think that expanded powers is certainly a possibility. I just don't wish to make any definitive statements tonight. We were sort of in a listening mode tonight as staff to listen to what your intentions were, and then we do plan to review and respond at a later date.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marie wanted to make the point that about the definitions. Have we covered that well enough to go ahead and go forward?
Take Jane first.
Okay, Jane.
Jane Gibson, board member. I just wanted to clarify two things. One is procedure. I don't feel the need to have motions and seconds and votes for every change because we didn't have any, of course, while we were working on this document. So I just want to be clear that maybe we're working in a more consensus kind of a mode where we can discuss and be open with what we think we need to do. So now the second thing then is Marie's reference to class. To include, are you asking to include class on the list of protected statuses? Marie, is that what you're asking for?
Marie Taylor, board member, it was Jenny.
It was Jenny, yeah.
It was Jenny to add socioeconomic status to the definitions, Jenny, under racial or other bias-based policing.
I would recommend socioeconomic status and housing status.
Just to include those on the list.
Yes, and housing status specifically because those are two separate areas where discrimination could occur, I believe.
I just want to be clear about at least my understanding of our discussions as a working group is that we were trying to broaden beyond protected classes. We thought that police complaints that arise in the community all should have a community review board review. And not strictly those that arise from protected classes. Socioeconomic status isn't a protected class, although I can certainly argue it should be, but it isn't. And housing status is probably not legally a protected class either. And I mean, I'm fine adding those in. I just want to be clear that when we add them into this paragraph, and I'm looking here at definitions under 12503A, that we still have, because of the way that it's phrased above, we still have a broader mandate in this ordinance, the way that we've revised it, to pick up complaints that go beyond things that arise out of bias. And that includes things that go beyond socioeconomic status and housing status. You know, you can have some affluent white man be treated with, you know, in a way that he regards as being police misconduct. And we would not want that not to be heard if he wanted to file a complaint by this board. Does that make sense? So all I'm saying is that we wanted to broaden the scope to capture all of the community complaints and not strictly those, not limit ourselves to those that are related to bias. I mean, maybe it would be bias. You know, you don't like wealthy white men, but I don't think we'd be able to demonstrate that.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Sorry, Jenny Robinson, board member. I hear you on that for sure. I think there is value in naming specific groups that are historically marginalized in police interactions.
Okay. And you want this under definitions?
I do, but I also recognize that this is my first day, and so I'm open to feedback.
Well, that's why this is a conversation. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sanjay?
So, Sanjay Mishra, board member, I appreciate Jenny introducing terms. See, this is what happens when you get new members. You get a wealth and diversity of views. So, appreciate it. I was going to suggest that rather than layout, we should say bias-based policing, and some categories could be. And you don't lay out everything. Or if you think we need to lay out everything very clearly, then we are restricting. Are we restricting ourselves to those? In this case, you could say, which may include among others. That's it. And so it may be race, gender, social class, and then leave some, because who knows, 15, 20 years from today, something else may come.
Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member. So I don't think we yet have consensus, at least I'm not in consensus yet, about having the board's focus be so broadened yet. And so I would like to hold on to the marginalized the class issue and the housing issue that Jenny has, so we can continue that aspect. I don't want to get bogged down in having that a full discussion on that yet, but just to put a placeholder for us to come back to talking about how the board's focus should be, and I think that some of the other tools we have in the ordinance could address the issues about excessive force against affluent, a white man. I think we have ways to address looking at policies that would be beneficial to, review for all people in Lawrence. But in terms of complaints, we could focus our work on marginalized communities. So that's just me throwing out my opinion at this point, but I don't want to get bogged down as we move through, but we can kind of put a placeholder to have a further discussion on that.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, why don't we go ahead and move to the 2504 to the specific duties of the board and kind of walk through those. Yeah.
Marie Taylor, board member. I just wanted to say we didn't start off saying thank you to the board panel who worked on, really did put a lot of hard work into this, I can tell. And I just wanted to make sure that we give our thanks to the work that they put in so that we can tear it apart. I'm sorry. But I mean, thank you so much for what you did already to get us to have this discussion.
Absolutely, thank you. And thank you all again for the great work that you've done. Thank you, Marie. Sanjay, did you want to say something? And Steph?
Yeah, I want to go down. I don't know if people want to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4. I am on 5, and Sanjay Mishra, board member, sorry, and I'm on 5. And initially it was racial or other bias-based policing. That's AG mandate. So we should leave that as a separate thing and then add our annual reports regarding all community member complaints as a separate. Because they have to do that, right? If I am correct, Officer Ernst, that AG mandates that you submit that report June
And if you're
1st or July 31st.
You're referring to the paragraph that talks about it mentions the new paragraph about a summary of complaints prior to July 31st. Is that what you're speaking about? Just to make sure we're on the...
Yes,
okay.
Number 5.
So on that right there, the reporting mechanism that the AG's office has set in place, which is set forth in the racial or other bias-based policing statute, requires the reporting that we have on that. I am not aware of any sort of reporting mechanism in place where we could provide a summary in any way, shape, or form to the AG's office other than the topic of racial or other bias-based policing.
Yes. So we should split that into one that goes to the AG and we also see it, and the other, which is the more general one, which we then hold the police department responsible.
I'll leave that up to the board, but the racial or other bias-based policing, we are statutorily required to the way the ordinance is written, I know currently as we present it to you prior to submitting it, but we're legally obligated to submit it to the AG's office prior to July 31st.
Jane?
Jane Gibson, board member. So the question, maybe this is one that Tony's going to say, we're going to look into this. Maybe we should ask you, Toni, if you would look into this and see if there's anything that prevents our asking for a report regarding all community member complaints. That would not preclude, it wouldn't affect in any way that they would provide their report that they're mandated by the Attorney General's office on bias-based policing, right? This would just, is there anything that prevents this board, CPRB, from asking for the broader scope of community member complaints? So could you come back to us with that?
Toni Wheeler, City Attorney. Yes, ma'am. I will put that on my list.
So, Tanya.
Okay, yes.
Sanjay Mishra, board member. I wonder why would the city have this board if we cannot ask for the information about community member complaints? Absolutely. And all I'm suggesting is that the racial or bias-based policing is mandated, so that stays a separate item. And then we ask for everything else.
Sure.
It's not an either or. Both are going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I read number 5, I just thought this was a simpler way to streamline. All complaints come here. Some are going to be certainly meeting the needs of the mandate that Sergeant Erst was talking about, and that can be done certainly. But we're being more specific about all complaints, correct? And they just happen to be perhaps there will be some that will be those that are mandatory reporting to the state. Jane?
Jane Gibson, board member. I would just point out that to ask for all community member complaints is inclusive of those that are racial and other bias-based policing complaints. So it's that's an inclusive column. We wouldn't need to split it out. They're both, as long as Toni finds out it's okay for us to ask. You know, if there's some reason we can't, then we'll pull it out. But
so Jane, sorry, if Sanjay Mishra, board member, because later on we say such report should be presented to the board prior to its submission to the Attorney General. So Attorney General will not accept the all complaints. So we should split those two and have two. We have 5 and 6. 5 is AG gets it and done, and 6 is we ask for the police to give us all the information.
thank you, Sanjay. I didn't understand your point. Now I do.
Yeah.
Okay, in this section, are there any other comments or questions or clarifications that we want to make? Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member. I would like to propose an additional duty for the board in terms of like having accountability to the community, which is to, I know you've all talked about to have it actually be a mandate that we require one community-wide forum per year. I've drafted some language, sorry, it's the lawyer in me. For the purpose of hearing views on the policies, practices, and procedures of the police department.
Can you repeat that again, Marie? I'm sorry, real quickly.
Marie Taylor, board member. So the concept is some sort of accountability that we would give to the community. And I'm proposing that it be requiring at least one community-wide forum per year for the purpose of hearing views on the policies, practices, and procedures of the police department.
Okay, Sanjay, and then Jenny.
But okay, let me start. So I absolutely appreciate, Marie, what you have said, because one of the questions I had for us was what's the board's accountability? At this point, we are acting more as supervisory rather than saying, we will do this. We promise that we will do this for you as a community. So that's a great point. And then maybe somewhere later down, we should have a discussion about how will the board at the end of the year assess its performance, that it did a good job or did not do a good job. So we close the loop on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to put that somewhere at the end. Thank you.
Jenny Robinson, board member. I just want to support what Marie said. I think that would make this group much more accessible for the public. And I agree with you, Sanjay, that having a way of assessing our work is really important. So, agree with both of you.
Thank you.
This is Stephanie Littleton, board member.
Yeah.
I keep waving, so I'm just going to jump in. I just want to kind of give a little bit of background to what Marie has brought up. And I appreciate this, Marie, because this, to your point, the reason why I brought up the request to increase the board from 7 to 9 was with the work, what we have yet to do that we haven't even been able to get to. And we have 2 or 3 different, subcommittees we would like to create. And to your very point, that's one of the things that we need to get to. That's so critical, right? You make a very, very good point. So I just wanted to kind of bring that back up because that's definitely what we need to, and we do need to get on with doing that. So thank you for bringing that up again.
Very good.
Are we good with this page? Can we go to the 8?
Mm-hmm.
So in the 8, we struck out somewhere it says receive complaint, board shall not conduct their own investigation into allegations of misconduct. You want to take the investigating role, or you want to bring the information? I don't know. Legally, I don't know. But as from a board member perspective, I don't want to get into investigations and mess up the entire process. I want to hold the police accountable. But I don't want to, because I don't understand the process.
Work group, would you like to
Are
respond
you
to
on
that?
8?
Yeah, on number 8.
I don't see that language in here that Sanjay's talking about.
Bill, are you on the red line version?
It's
Yeah?
At the bottom of 8, it's all scratched through. That's what
It
Sonia
is.
said.
Yeah, but this is Bill Graybill, board member, but I think that's covered in sending it to the OPA for investigation, the manner in which any other allegation of misconduct in a normally investigated, is normally investigated. I think that covers all that stuff that got crossed out.
So
That's saying the police are investigating. It doesn't say the board's investigating.
Okay, so my misinterpretation, sorry Tanya, Sanjay Mishra, board member, my misinterpretation then was because we struck that out, did it mean that the board could do its own investigation? If we don't envision the board doing it, we should leave that language. I think that cleaner. That's how I think about it.
May I respond?
Yeah, Bill.
It's Bill Graybill, board member. Sonia, I think what we were trying to do with that is we were trying to put this into some kind of an order, a procedural order that you could follow. When we took that language out, I think as a working group, we felt like that clarified that step of the procedure. And take all the rest of that out so there was no mix-up. It was a clarification mechanism. And I personally think that it's better to keep it as simple as possible so that we can keep our procedural aspect straight.
Okay, we've got Marie.
I think is that fair, Jane?
Yeah, I
Thank you, Bill. Jane and then Marie. Sorry, go ahead, Jane. Yeah.
Jane Gibson, board member. Yeah, I think that's right. We agree that as a CPRB that we don't have the investigative, good Lord, I can't say that word tonight, investigative skills ourselves. So you'll note that, as Bill points out, this number 8 says that the police are still doing the investigation, right? So, but later on, what we say is that if we think that the investigation was flawed in some way, that one of the options is that we can ask the city manager to hire an independent investigator because we're not qualified to do the investigation. That's not who we are.
Right. Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member. So when I read through the sections here, I kind of was looking at it from a lens of what we wanted to accomplish as opposed to the details about whatever procedure, because I figured the city attorney's office would tell us more detail about what could happen or not happen or how we could fit in. But I just saw it as generally the goal being more transparency in the investigation process, having some role in reviewing that independently. And so like the ticking off those as important measures that we would like to see in whatever procedural method is laid out. And when I looked at this, you know, it's like a spectrum of how much we could be involved. You know, currently there's like no involvement because it's based on whether someone, after going through all of that complaint process, has the energy to keep fighting and wants an appeal. And so one easy way we could fix that is make it an automatic appeal. So we don't put the burden on them to take yet one more step to try to get some redress to their concerns. So if we just said, we just want to make sure that they can get to us and we make it automatic, then we wouldn't have to do any other kinds of changes. We would make sure that automatically we are inserted into the process. But that only solves one level of the spectrum, right? Because if we want to be independent and have the ability to have additional material, do our own investigation, well then we'd have to have more authority to do that sort of like step up involvement. And then the third step up would be having the city hire an independent investigator. And then I've seen now some cities, it was really hard to research other boards like this in other cities because they're also in flux. And so it was basically like you'd have to read the paper to see what's happening in what other cities are doing. Some cities are creating their boards now. So it's even hard to find a model for what we're trying to accomplish. But it's definitely, I see it as a spectrum of how far we want to be involved in the process. And without knowing even what the volume would be, it's kind of hard to figure out where we would fit in and whether we have the wherewithal to do all the other tasks that we want to do, all the policy recommendations we'd love to do, and then do complaints, especially if the complaints are beyond just racial and bias-based policing interactions, right? So it's hard to get a grasp. And so I applaud you all for trying to figure out think through all the steps would be, but I don't think we have to be too bogged down in what the steps would be if we can get consensus on the level of engagement and our role would be in that process.
Jane?
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Jane Gibson, board member. I think you've captured the essence of the question, really, because of all the different things that we're expected to do, which of course is why Stephanie had originally proposed we increase the size of the board, because we want to be able to do these things, but we'd like to do them well. We effectively have an automatic appeal built in here. It's not written as automatic appeal, but that's effectively what we've got. So that we see all the complaints, we see all of the investigations, and that's our moment to decide, is this done well? Is there missing information? Do we need to ask for more information? Do we need to ask for an independent investigator? So we basically built that in without calling that an automatic appeal. And the reason is, as you said, we originally had only appeal, and people were not really even being advised that they had the right to appeal. So we want to be sure that people have that knowledge, have that right, but we want to be able to be involved sooner and know what the complaints are, and be able to read through the investigations to see if there's more needed. But you're right. I mean, it's really about how much energy and time do we have as a board to do all these things that they would like for us to do. And it's a step. Maybe it doesn't go far enough. Maybe that's something we need to think about.
Okay, Sanjay?
So I appreciate Marie's point very much, that what do you want to do? You need to decide upfront. But based on, so maybe the couple of years that I have served on this board, if you don't take ownership. It doesn't help you. So it's important that we say this is in our purview. And how explicitly we can say that is the issue.
Jenny?
Jenny Robinson, board member. I'm just wondering about the volume of reports that you have to go through as a board.
Jane?
Jane Gibson, board member. To date, that would be 0. And that is the problem. We are completely excluded from the process. So we don't have an answer to that question because we don't know.
Jenny? Mm-hmm.
Jenny Robinson, board member. Because reading through this, it sounds like we have the ability to request that information, but like Marie was saying, there's no automatic process. And like I think I'm hearing from Sanjay and Marie, also this is kind of something that's growing not only here but around the country. So we're kind of having to define what our vision is and focus, not try to grab it all and do it all. But yeah, I definitely support Marie saying there needs to be some sort of automated system.
This is Stephanie Littleton, board member. Marie, I just wanted to give you, and Jenny as well, and those, not on our little working group meeting, but just to give a little bit on resource. I did meet and visit for a couple of hours with the chair for the Olathe Citizen Review Board, and really did some homework there for a couple of hours. He gave me some great online resources. One that you might want to make note of that has some models out there is called NACOLE. It's National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. So NACOLE.org. Excellent resource. Has several models out there. I went and studied those and brought those to our working group. There's a couple, and one in particular that was very close in size to our population here. And that was the Albany, New York Police Department and their Citizen Review Board. So we did some homework because we're trying to walk through this, right, and kind of definitely get to your point, Marie, get the transparency, getting to see the complaints, since we have not seen any. But I just wanted to add that, just so if anybody wanted to go look at some of that online, it's a great resource out there. They're helping review boards to build and create. So there you go.
Very good. Thanks, Steph. Okay, a little more time on the duties. Any other comments or clarifications? Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member. I just wanted to say that I really do appreciate that you've laid out and the level of increased role of the board in this area. And I think it's just a matter of figuring out the details of what's allowed or how we would word it in terms of, how things would flow through the city system. But I think that I really appreciate that you're taking such a strong role for the board in being more active and engaged in getting to have a say on those complaints.
I completely agree, Marie. I too am wondering about conceptualizing what our role is that works with the police department as well in terms of their processes. So when you stated, Marie, the community engagement piece, that's real important, suggesting at least once a year to review the policies, practices, so on and so forth. That means all of that has to be out there and available. So we're going to backtrack and say, okay, well, there are a lot of built-in assumptions sometimes in some things, and so I want to put that too kind of in the margins, so we don't forget about that. And I'm the kind of I think about closing loops a lot too, And so when I'm thinking about closing loops, I'm thinking about the process in what we're attempting to do here with really transparency and accountability. And I'm wondering about how to work with the police department to make sure that that stays consistent, and that you know, perhaps at some point we need to examine how that process works in the police department, and maybe that's where we can make some recommendations on the best practices in complaints. And that might be thinking about, you know, more certainly transparency, accountability, and more objectivity is what I want to get at too. And that's with a third party or an independent skilled person to do the investigation or to handle the complaint. And again, that's an in-house process with the police department, which I believe they should own their complaints, no doubt about that. And then they should also, in terms of the outcomes of those complaints, they shouldn't be, you know, necessarily seen as, it's a negative thing on the department. In fact, it should be probably examined closely, all of the mechanisms there, to think about what kinds of recommendations in practice, policy, and other kinds of perhaps protocols need to be made to reduce the likelihood of some conflict or some complaints or some, you know, practices that really need to be examined and changed. Does that make sense? I know that's a lot, but that's what this document also made me think about. Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member, to follow up on that, on those ideas, is part of what we're asking for as well is transparency for the board, but then there's the other component of having transparency with public, and that there's been a lot of effort to keep things confidential, but I think there has to be a point where we say what can be reported out by the board. Because let's say we do investigations, we address complaints, and then it becomes yet another black box, and the public doesn't know what were the facts, you know, de-identified, but still what were the kinds of complaints that we received, because then then they'll be looking at us as the ones who aren't being transparent. So I think it has to be, we've got to figure out what the city can accept for disclosing information that is at least descriptive enough for the public to know what was the subject, what happened in these complaints. And so we have to get more permission to report out. That doesn't really fit within this section, but it's just this conception of, yes, give us more information, give the public more information as well.
So, Sanjay Mishra, board member. So that's a great point, and I am looking, Marie, at that as one of the metrics for good board membership, transparency and accountability, is to say, at the end of the year, we say to the public, we received 15 complaints. This is how we handle most of the complaints. So you build some transparency and clearly. So what I would like to us to be thinking about is, this is what our wish list should be. Rather than at this point, think about what will pass muster. Because then we will know. Because everybody is, as you said, everything is in a flux. Because the police departments are rethinking their roles, the city commission is rethinking its roles, and how the three will come to play are rethinking their roles. So they cannot use old models into saying, this we will not let you do. Because it's looking forward now. We have to be progressive rather than be bound by our actions of the past. So I would commend the board, and whatever they think is going to be good for those three things, access, transparency, and accountability, we should ask for. You know?
Okay, Jenny?
Jenny Robinson, board member. Sanjay, you said what I was thinking just now, is that transparency and accessibility have to go hand in hand. We need to be an accessible board to the public. And right now, as a community member, I didn't know that this existed until just a couple of months ago. I'm just wondering, what has your relationship in the past been like with the Lawrence Police Department? How have you collaborated with them in the past?
Wants to take? I can say very good, because we haven't seen anything and everything has been good, is the assumption on the surface. See, so that's the thing. But and at this point, I'm not willing to. Put it positively. I'm willing to say that we have a professional police.
Jane?
I'm sorry, Jane Gibson, board member. Just to try to make this a little bit practical, I guess what we need to know is what are the boundaries around what we can report out, because I do see that this is a big issue for us, and it has been in all of our discussions as well, because we signed that confidentiality agreement as a condition of being on the board. So maybe what we want to think about is whether we would like to revisit the question of the confidentiality agreement itself, and ask Toni if, I don't even know if that's something to ask Toni. Really, we're really talking about abandoning that agreement and rewriting it, or revising it, and maybe just trying to imagine something completely different with regard to that agreement. So that seems like that's another project, really, isn't it? To revise the confidentiality agreement. Is that something that we need to include in this ordinance revision? I guess that's a question.
We have good resources, better resources than me on the committee now. So we can handle those tasks much better.
I think that, sure. I'm just going to real quickly, and Jenny, I see your hand. I think that's of course a separate document, but the ordinance does address the responsibility to confidentiality. Okay. But I think it's a separate document. Jenny?
Jenny Robinson, board member. I was going to say that I would be happy to do a little research and see, Stephanie shared that the Nicole, I'd be happy to do some digging and maybe contact the Albany board and see if there's any kind of documents or wording that they could share with us around confidentiality or how they're doing that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Jenny. Bill?
With all due respect, Tanya, we have a capable city attorney. I think her office is more than capable of researching this and letting us know how far we can go with that issue. And I think we ought to leave it up to them to tell us.
Any comments or responses to that? Jane?
Well, Jane Gibson, I'd just like to, I'd like to know if Toni is willing. I think Bill's right. I would love to hear from the city attorney's office what the boundaries are around what we can do with this confidentiality question. So I'd like to hear from Toni, please.
Toni Wheeler, city attorney. Yes, I would be willing, and we have the resources to do that sort of research and to report what other communities are doing, and also to give you some thoughts share some of our thoughts on these topics. Obviously, this board's work is very important to the city commission, and the city commission has let staff know that they want us to provide you with the resources that you need to bring the best product forward. So we're certainly willing to do that. I just want to be respectful of the board, and I'm happy to be asked, and I want to respond that yes, we are happy to do that work.
Thank you, Toni. Thanks, Bill. Thank you, Ginny. Feel free to keep looking though, because I'm going to spend some time looking at that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and any other comments in the duties section? There's a lot I would like to talk very briefly, and I think this is where a lot of discussion really does need to take place. Under number 2, A, B, C, D, again, that might get into, they're more specific processes. And I guess what I want to know is feedback from, I guess, Toni, on that part of the document too, the working document, if those are things that are potentially within our purview to do.
Toni Wheeler, City Attorney. Ma'am, could you identify the paragraph that you're referring to?
I'm sorry. It's under duties, number 9. And it's, well, it's the former D, now it's C.
Okay. Toni Wheeler, City Attorney, are you referring to the paragraph that starts, board members shall receive the results of police investigation and any additional statement by the complainant in a confidential manner? Is that what you're referring to?
No, it's
page 4, Toni.
Okay.
I was thinking, I'm on page 5, and I'm where the board shall review the police department's findings to determine whether they are supported by substantial competent evidence.
Well, Toni Wheeler, City Attorney. Yes, again, we are happy to provide comment on the provisions that you've drafted so far. I'm just not prepared tonight to answer all of those questions, but I certainly can add that to our list of things to look at and report back to the board. Is that sufficient?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And in fact, you stated you'd do that earlier, so I appreciate that. The other thing, a question that I wanted to raise, I have a couple of things, because this says something about addressing the city manager, correct? And I'm thinking in terms of process, asking the city manager to hire an investigator, and there's some other paragraphs that say we need to report something to the police chief. There are just some clarifications that I wanted in the document in terms of is there one person that we're supposed to be working with in terms of our role as a community board? Is it to the city commission? Is it to, I know to the public certainly, but in terms of process, does it go to the city manager? Does it go to the city commission? Or do we take things directly to the police chief? In terms of any recommendations that we would make or any findings or any of the processes that are laid out in here. Jane?
Jane Gibson, board member. Tanya, I would just say that this ordinance is where we get our authority. So you're asking, do we have it? Well, we're trying to get it. So that's what this ordinance would give to us. And Toni can say, whether there's some state proscription against it. But this is our way of trying to open up the process so that there is transparency and accountability on the part of the police department.
Okay, thank you. Sanjay?
Sanjay Mishra, board member. I was looking at C, when we ask for an independent investigation. Would it be appropriate to put a time bound to it so that this doesn't go into and stay on for 3 years as an ongoing investigation? will report in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever. So justice is quick.
Okay, Jane?
Jane Gibson, board member. I might suggest, Sanjay, that time limit, if there is to be one, would be set by the city manager, because we're not the ones who would be hiring an investigator or paying for it. It would be the city manager who would do it. And that means that the city manager would set a time limit if that was appropriate. I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to do that. That's just my opinion.
Okay, so Sanjay Mishra, board member, where I come from is we are trying to, I want to use the word seek justice here. And to make sure there's a fairness in the process. And again, means if this, as a city, we are not able to provide this justice in a timely manner, we have failed the citizen. And this is coming as a review process. So I don't know, means we can request the city manager what's reasonable time frame for somebody to look at a thing, and hopefully they don't say 18 months. Again, because we need to expedite things. So that was, thank you.
Okay. Any other, thank you, Sanjay. Thanks for your responses, Jane. Any other discussion in the duties with certainly the consideration of the addition that was mentioned earlier by Marie? Again, I'm with you, Jane. I don't think we need to make any motions or anything. I think listening to the content onto another revision would be the way to go, and consensus build as we move along. Jane?
And Gibson, well, towards that end, Sanjay, would you think, because this is a very practical matter we're facing here, which is, what words get on the page? What do we forward? We can all agree that it'd be great if this were done in a timely way, but what words need to go on the page that would bring us to consensus around this issue? I agree with you that this should be done in a timely way, and that foot dragging and it does not serve justice or this community or healthy police community relations, which we presumably want to promote. So I guess I'm asking, what can we say here? Can we say that we would like to, we could ask the city manager to hire an independent investigator who would carry out an investigation in a timely fashion? I mean, that's pretty vague. It's really, it leaves it open-ended, but it sets up some expectation that we care about foot dragging and things like that. I'm not sure if it goes far enough for you, but I think we all mean to try to reach some agreement here. I'm trying to find that.
So, okay, Bujay.
It sounds like to me, and again, this is Jenny Robinson, board member. It sounds like to me there's really no data to base a timeline off of right now. And I'm wondering about the fluidity of this document. When are we able to revise it? When we have more information, when we have more data on what the process actually looks like, at what point can we revise it to include a more specific, timely manner? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Sanjay Mishra, board member. So absolutely, and my understanding is we can come up with an edits anytime we want to. The board thinks that this is what we need to change, we make the changes, put it out to the city commission, and they accept or they send back notice to us. I was going to lean on Marie then to help us with the reasonable, because she has some experience based on experience. So timely, reasonable, those are some holding words. But I also wanted to match it to the seriousness of the crime or seriousness of the complaint. Because if this is a big complaint, then I'm willing to give them a little more time. If this is a smaller complaint, I don't want to give them more. So that is where I'm coming from.
I think also I'm looking along with you on thinking about feedback from other folks and stakeholders in this. Toni, so after reading this and responding to it, would that be something that you could help us with by presenting it to us at the 27th meeting? Or is that?
Toni Wheeler, City Attorney. Some proposed language regarding the timeliness of any investigations, independent investigations that the board requests. Is that what you're asking? Or are you asking us to incorporate all of the thoughts and questions that you've had tonight and report back on the 27th? We are happy to respond to you on the 27th. If you could just identify what it is that you're specifically what you're asking staff to report back on. At the last meeting, it was my understanding that the 27th was an opportunity for the public to weigh in on a draft. And I just want to make sure that we're clear at what you want to happen at the next meeting.
Sure. Well, I'm going back to what Jane said earlier. Are these things we can do? I mean, I think that's probably the most important thing. Jane, would you agree with that?
I'm sorry, are what things that we can do?
Adding these additional duties and responsibilities, are these things that we can do? I think you were asking, we want to do them, but we were going to have Toni respond to it.
Well, you asked Toni if she would do those, and my argument is that this is how we get the authority to do those things. So I want the feedback from the staff. I think we all want that. But this is a question of just the verbiage that we use to talk about the timeliness of investigations. And I think it would be helpful if Toni, I would like it if Toni could come back with some proposed language there. I think that's a specific kind of request. She probably would appreciate if we would be less vague.
Yes, thank you. Certainly that, but I'm thinking about some of the other items as well. Just getting your feedback on that and your response on that. And I'll talk about the next steps here toward the end. Are there any other additions in this section or any comments? No? Okay, let's move on then to the membership and qualifications. There weren't many changes there. Does anyone have any additions or any additional thoughts on that? Marie.
Thank you. So looking back, Marie Taylor, board member, looking back on this, listening to the city commission meetings, it seemed, and also looking at the charge, part of the charge was looking at the qualifications. And the way that I interpreted that was to also look at it through a lens of racial inequities that may be perpetuated by how we set up our qualifications. So I did a little bit of research to see if I could find other cities that also did restrictions and automatic disqualifications for people with criminal records. And I didn't find a lot of cities, and the ones I did find, there was a lot of articles that criticized them for that. And so I'm going to read off my notes so I make sure that I say everything I wanted to say about this aspect. And so the commentaries that I find have said, and this is what I also believe, is that it can perpetuate biases against those who have past incarceration rates, and these rates that demonstrate racial disparities affecting Black people, Latino people, when their interactions with police, in arrests and sentencing. So we know this about our community. The Lawrence Journal-World, June 9th in the paper reported that Douglas County had disparities between white and Black incarceration rates that were higher than the national average. So our county has incarceration rates for Black people is 4.7 times higher than the rate for whites. So we may not intend for this to be a bar for people, especially when we do know that there are lots of social justice movements that are trying to avoid, outcomes like disenfranchisement for ex-offenders, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, high rates of houselessness, right, for these folks as well, who are trying to come back into society. So it does concern me that if we have these kinds of bars, one, it could have a chilling effect, even if you did not have this background, that you had to worry about whether you'd met the time frames for some of these restrictions. And so when I look back at I went back and listened to when this ordinance was adopted, and it seemed like the focus was on, well, we need to have people who are impartial. We need to have people who don't have bias. And so if that's still, the goal, there's other ways I think we can accomplish that. And one city I found that I thought would be a really good model is what Eugene, Oregon is doing. And so as part of their application process, they ask it open-ended questions about people's feelings about, whether they can be unbiased and impartial and fair. And if that's really what the goal is, we could require questions of people. And so I wrote them out. I can read them out. I thought they were really good questions. So
are they like screening questions then for those?
They're like like you write like short answers. So they say in the Eugene, Oregon's for their civilian review board, they ask that the qualification is that you have the following characteristics as assessed by open-ended application questions to kind of fit it into the language we have for this ordinance. And it says the questions were based on, so it says you have a demonstrated ability to be fair, impartial, and unbiased. There's an absence of any real or perceived bias, prejudice, or conflict of interest. You have a record of community involvement. Ability to build working relationships and communicate effectively with diverse groups, and a demonstrated commitment to the purposes of the board. And in our case, it would be like OPA. But so the idea is that you would ask them, like, why do those would be the kinds of things, the things you were screening for in their responses to open-ended questions. And so I thought that was a fair way to not hold people's past against them and make a presumption that they had no bias, a presumption that they had bias just based on their life experiences to that date. But you don't know, so we don't know. So that's the kind of the concept I would like my board members to consider.
Thank you. Jane?
Jane Gibson, I like that tons. I totally love that. I want that. I want that in our what we have is one that's all about who gets to be excluded. And what I like about what you've just offered is who gets to be included. What are the qualifications? What are the characteristics we want to see in our co-board members? And I think that's really strong and it's ethical. And I think it gets us closer to what we want than just saying who can't be on here because of some past record. I like that a lot.
Okay, any other, Jenny, sorry.
Jenny Robinson, board member. I just want to support what Marie and Jane have said. There's a big push right now for boards to be inclusive of people with lived experience of the people that they're serving. And just noticing, from looking at this list through a lens of, houselessness, someone who's been charged with loitering for the purposes of solicitation, that would count a lot of people out. So I am definitely all for an inclusive definition, with the knowledge that there might be some legal limits, but erring on the side of being inclusive of people with lived experience of interacting with the police.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, Sanjay?
Is it possible to ask people to take some implicit bias surveys? And you could direct them to a site where they would take, I don't know, is in an employment, is that ever looked at in the city?
Toni, Brandon?
This is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. Sanjay, the question was whether or not the city undertakes or provides implicit bias training.
Okay, training is fine, but I was looking at if you want somebody to be on the board or an employee, do you do an implicit bias screening? And then you can do some corrective.
Yes.
Because if you don't know where they are, then you don't know.
Yes, that is a good question. This is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. I am not aware of any implicit bias screening as a test that we conduct with any of our employees. We certainly provide training to employees, but a test for a screening purpose, I'm not aware of. Captain McKinley or Toni, are you aware of the use of any sort of screening tools?
The attorney, Toni Wheeler. We do some screening in the application of our in the evaluation of our police officers. I can say that I think that is a possibility as long as we can find an instrument that we believe is credible and worthy of that. Also, I would think that as long as we had the person's consent or they consented to submitting to that, I suppose that, if they didn't consent to that, that would be one factor in evaluating their application. So I certainly think it is a possibility as long as we can provide an instrument that everyone has confidence in.
I hear it's doable. Sanjay Mishra, board member. I take that as consent. That is doable. And I can guarantee that a lot of implicit bias instruments. This is a very hot topic in research.
Okay, Brandon and then Jane.
This is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. I'll defer to Jane.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
Jane Gibson, board member. I'm not sure how we do this and not violate COMA. I would like for us to see the document from Eugene, Oregon that Marie suggested. I think we should all read that, and I think we should all look at whatever instruments are out there. This is a bigger job, just this one piece of who can be on this board, and we need to be thoughtful about this. I guess we need to ask Brandon, how can we all get access to all of this information? How do we do that so that it can be distributed without violating COMA? I don't know how to do that. Can you help us, Brandon?
Yes, this is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. Toni, please feel free to correct me or offer any other thoughts, but I think it's pretty simple. If she will just email me the documents, then I can distribute that to the board members. And that will just be a one-way communication. And as long as the board members don't engage in a discussion by email about that document, then I think that will satisfy the COMA.
So Brandon, you would send it to all of us?
Yes.
Okay, Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member. You just want me to send the copies of their ordinances, right, that I found online to Brandon?
Maybe the copies of the sections on qualifications or criteria for being on
the questions.
I don't know how long the ordinance is, but I would like to have that section in it.
Yeah, I'll just send what I found on their ordinance. Basically, it's just the same kind of thing we have with an ordinance that establishes their board. Mm-hmm. I just found it online. So I'll just send it to Brendan.
That'd be great. And then I guess procedurally, we haven't talked about how these changes get made, but or if you want the working group to continue to work on the documents, or how you want to see these changes in the document, or if members of the working group want to continue. We haven't discussed any of that, so maybe that's for the end of this discussion.
Right, those are next steps for sure. Marie?
I had one more comment, and it was more of a overall comment on the ordinance. Can we take out all the his and her and just have, say, city manager or designee, and just get rid of all of the his and her pronouns, because those aren't the only ones. So when I do my own writing, I just write gender neutral. It doesn't need to have that. And so there's just a ton of them. We could just like scrape them all out.
Heritage.
Sanjay, then Jenny.
Great, that's a great point. Thank you. See, this is what happens when you bring new people onto. So I did a quick search on my phone for implicit bias test, and the American Bar Association has something called an implicit bias test.
Jenny. Brandon,
Excuse me?
can you send it to Brandon so we can have it?
I can. You spoke too late, Jane. I quit the page, but I will find it. I will send it to Brandon. Thank you.
Okay, very good. We'll go Jenny and then Bill.
Jenny Robinson, board member. I just want to support what Marie's saying. When I initially read that, I appreciated whoever changed it to her and his instead of his and hers. However, taking it a step further, just a gender neutral there, they, I think would be perfect.
Very good. Thank you. Bill?
This is Bill Graybill, board member. I have a request of Toni. It fits in with maybe our procedure. Would it be possible for you all to go through this draft, and if there are sections that are proscribed by statutes, let us know what those are and what statutes proscribe them or prohibit them? Would that be possible?
The attorney, Toni Wheeler. Yes, that would be possible. We will go through it pretty much line by line and try to identify any statutes that prescribe any of the recommendations that you've made.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
As a follow-up, I think if we do that, then we know where we're at.
Yeah.
And until then, we're just scrambling in the dark.
Agreed. Thank you, Bill. Okay, let's continue then to complete. And the rest of the document, are there any other comments or questions? Under confidentiality, I think there's a little mark by that in terms of and questions about that were raised earlier. Anything else in the document? Okay, if not, let's talk next steps real quickly. Thank you all too. This is good work. You all did a great job, and working through the document is good work as well, for sure. So in terms of next steps, I think I appreciate our group ambition to have it open on the 27th, but I'm not sure if that's possible at this point. Would you all agree with me? Okay, so is it possible to have another working session to revisit the document after the certainly suggestions that we've made, and then the work that Ms. Wheeler will be doing with us? Marie?
So Marie Taylor, board member. I would like us to talk just a little bit about how we can fit that toolkit that Mayor Ananda had presented at one of recent board meetings, the Government Alliance Racial Equity Toolkit. because when I look at it, I want to very earnestly fill it out, but there's steps to it that you can't complete unless you get community engagement, because that's really critical. So I feel like we can continue to do this and talk amongst ourselves, but until we get that aspect, we can't even start that kind of analysis to see if we've missed something. I mean, we've been being very careful to look at people who, trying to kind of imagine what we think would be in the best interests of the community, but we haven't heard from the community or presented it. So I don't know how far along we go in developing an ordinance if it doesn't reflect what we hear back. And then we might end up not being so efficient in how we, have it reflect what the community needs as well.
Sure, that's a good point, Marie. I'm just real quickly wondering if we couldn't put kind of what our intent and value statement is in the revision work that's being done on the ordinance. That could be helpful to make that kind of statement to the community, to also prompt or springs some type of, the opportunity for feedback from the community as well. Jane, you had your hand up.
Well, I guess I was going to talk about community engagement.
Okay.
And certainly Tanya, to be able to say, I guess, along with the document, what our intent is here is key. We had talked about using the 27th to invite the public to come and talk to us about this document. I see no reason why they couldn't do that while we continue to work on it and receive information from Toni Wheeler and Brandon, who will distribute information on, how we decide what the criteria are for membership on the board. So I guess I would suggest that, and it's just one option, somebody may have a much better idea than I've got, but that we keep the 27th open to the public, and that we also, but that we maybe delay what I thought we were going to try to do pretty soon, which was to make ourselves available. No, I don't know. There's no reason to delay that either. I guess we talked about making ourselves available to community groups that wanted to discuss the document with us. But maybe if we think about this more as the evolving working document rather than, or just as the working document, rather than as something that we're trying to sell, because we're certainly not trying to sell it, we're trying to get it right, then maybe that's something that we can distribute and to try to get people to give us feedback and invite us, to talk with them about what our goals are and how they read what we've done so far. I guess the timeline opens up. We had thought maybe we were moving a little faster, and I'm fine not moving faster. I know Bill would like for us to be more thoughtful than we've been even to this time. So can we keep the 27th so that we get community input there and find ways? I think I sent you an email, Tanya, about some suggestions from one of the city commission members about ways to engage the community, to let them know about the 27th, but also to let people know they can communicate with us by email, that, we want to hear from them, and that we can all use our own social media networks. If you're on Facebook, you can on Facebook to talk to you about what they want to see in this document. And all of us can bring our notes back on the 27th from any feedback we've got. And that's a process that doesn't have to end on the 27th. It can continue well past the 27th.
Right. Absolutely. And I think I completely agree, Jane. And I think as the document develops, when we kind of have some final type of draft, then we could even, open it up to address any of the community input that we've had to make sure that those considerations were met in working on the document. Did somebody, Jenny?
I'm just wondering what edits, if any, will be made before we share this with the public.
Jane?
Well, it's already shared with the public, Jane Gibson, board member. So they have the red line version and the edited version without the red line. That's already out there. The question I guess we have to answer is what changes do we agree on this evening that we need to see in the document? I'm hearing some things that we're not quite ready to do, like criteria for membership. And some things maybe we're ready to do, although I don't think I heard from very many people about the use of pronouns. We can make it gender neutral pretty quickly and easily unless there's somebody that would not want us to do that, but I haven't heard anybody say that either. There are some suggestions in here that I think we can try to work with and see if we can come up with language. Toni is going to come up with some language for us on timeliness of investigations or something. So we're not ready to edit the whole thing for sure. I mean, even after tonight, I'm not sure which areas everybody would like to see changed already and which ones we want to think more about. I know Marie has some issues that she's got on, wants us to hold on, and that we want to bring up again and talk about how focused or how narrowly focused we're going to be in terms of the kinds of complaints we receive. So that's a conversation we're not through having yet. And that could change everything about this document if we do more narrowly circumscribe the kinds of complaints we receive. That's pretty big. So there's a limit, I guess, to even what we're willing to agree to at this point.
Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member. I think that it would be premature for us to have to try to figure out the wording for some of these things before we have community feedback on it. So I don't want us to have to rework what turns out may not be acceptable. I mean, we don't know yet, right? So I think that having the hearing and not hearing, this is me, the lawyer talking. Okay. Okay. The public feedback would be really beneficial to us too, because then we wouldn't have spent all this time crafting something that doesn't fit with the community. But my concern is how can we make sure we get a good crowd? I mean, it's much easier, you know, pre-pandemic to pack the city hall with people, but Zoom also has its advantages, is that people can come from from their homes, from wherever they can gather, wherever they can get access to a computer. So the issue to me then is how do we promote and get some publicity, and can we get a citywide, basically like a flyer, a virtual flyer for it so that we get a good turnout.
Brandon? Yeah. Brandon, what are the possibilities there?
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. City staff can help in any way that the board would like. We do have a communications group that does a very good job of promoting functions through social media. We can do a media announcement, traditional media announcement through print media, and we can advertise on the city's website. So we could put together, if it's the August 27th date, if there's consensus around that this is the date that the board is prepared to engage in a broader public conversation about the proposed ordinance changes, we could go ahead and begin advertising that date. There is another option as well, which is we call it Lawrence Listens, and that is our survey tool, where we could do something like post the proposed ordinance on the website, and people could view it in their own time and provide written comments.
I like that.
I don't know if the board feels like it's in a state to do that at this point or not.
Okay, Sanjay?
Sanjay Mishra, board member. So thank you, Brandon. Those are great suggestions. So I was just thinking if we could tap into some of the work the police department has done in their outreach with different communities, to go to those communities, because remember, they have talked about so many outreach events, activities they have done with groups. So I understand this is not table in South Park, but they have still worked with certain groups, and they could go back to those and say, look, this is what the community is doing. and we will appreciate your reports.
This is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. I will just advise that we are strongly encouraging all of our city staff to avoid in-person meetings. And so that it does obviously become quite complicated at this point to circle back around with some of our groups that we do meet with.
I was just thinking if they could do electronically, just in this day and
Understood.
Bill?
You know, I think one of the things on this board that we need to think about is credibility. And I would hate to see us have a big public meeting that started out with a report from the city attorney saying 90% of what we've come up with is probably not doable because it's prohibited by statute. I think this board becomes real uncredible if that happens. I would like to see us wait until we get a report from the city attorney's office to see kind of where we're at, and we have a framework that we can talk to the public about. I think it's a little premature to have that public meeting before we find out where we stand legally. And I think we ought to stick with just having the 27th meeting as a working meeting.
This is Stephanie Littleton, board member. Toni, can we ask of you some guidance on this, please?
Certainly. Toni Wheeler, city attorney. Our office can work very hard to do that evaluation and be ready to report back on the 27th. I can understand Board Member Graybill's point that you may wish to have those things nailed down before you put a draft out for the public to comment on. One thought I had is if you could come up with sort of the concepts as Board Member Taylor was talking about what your intentions are without being specific or not having specific language. Maybe that is something that you could take to the community and ask them to comment on and give you direction if that's the way that you want to go to. So you could solicit input more on your concepts or your ideas or your intentions, and then submit an ordinance at a later stage. And there's nothing that says that you can only have one public feedback meeting. You could have some at different stages. And city staff is pretty adept at getting notices out to meetings in a timely manner. So that is something that, that's something I throw out there as a possibility. I apologize for that. So is that responsive to the question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Jane Gibson, board member. I think Bill makes good sense. So I want to retract my suggestion that we keep the 27th for the public, that we have the 27th as a working meeting, and hear back from Toni Wheeler on that date. And I appreciate Toni's suggestions that we're not restricted to, a one-shot public meeting. We can spread this out.
Okay, everyone in agreement then with that? Okay, good. I see thumbs. That's good. Okay. All right. So we'll keep the 27th as a working meeting to receive the good work that Toni will do for us. Thank you, Toni. I think what we should do probably is pull out calendars and then set up maybe a plan that we could advertise for the hearing dates and all those kinds of things. I really like what you offered, Brandon, on that Lawrence Listens. I think that's a really great tool, and I think that could really generate a lot of response from the community, and it's really accessible. So that's how we'll proceed. Any other comments, questions, or ideas going forward?
Oh, this is Stephanie.
I really have appreciated what Jenny and Marie brought tonight to our meeting, and Marie really gave me some food for thought that I really liked, and I'm still kind of processing it in my head as Toni goes forward. I appreciate to look at all the revisions.
With the whole thought of not going too broad. Really, really good point there. So we don't lose grasp of the marginalized groups. And also the consideration of looking at the policies for the excessive force. Because all of those inclusive, we want to make sure that we're addressing, right? But maybe we take a step back, Marie, to your point. You go, okay, how do we, and Toni, obviously when they take a deep look at it, they're going to give us those foods for thought. But I just like that. I really appreciate them with your 3 points as well for accessibility, transparency, and such. That's phenomenal. So thank you so much. And Jenny, to you as well, with some of the terminology that we hadn't even thought of to include. So thank you both.
Very good. Right, and I really liked the conversation about qualifications too, because that's an accessibility piece that's very important. Thank you. Brandon, I see you texted us. We don't have a September meeting scheduled yet.
This is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. We did discuss possibly scheduling a September meeting at the last meeting, and I said that I would send out a poll to the board members to see if there was a particular date that worked and that also worked on our calendar for this room, so it could be televised. In that discussion, I did not anticipate our new board members, Jenny and Marie, joining the board during that time period, and so I thought I would wait. In addition to that, I was also traveling out of state, and so I thought I would wait until this evening and see if it's still of interest, and if it is, we can either pin down a date tonight, or I can follow up with a doodle poll or something to that effect to find out a good date and time that will work for everybody.
Sanjay?
So, Sanjay Mishra, board member. Brandon, when you send out the doodle poll, if you do, will you only doodle the days the room is available?
Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. Absolutely.
Okay. We were looking at a Thursday, second Thursday, third Thursday, something like that was the discussion last time. So, okay.
Yes.
Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member. So this is more to talk about future item, because as looking through the ordinance, I would like us to think about what we can exploit that we currently have within our toolkit through this ordinance. And I know you all have been very short-staffed, in some ways, because lacking board members, but I have a lot of energy. And so I think if we want to talk about setting up subcommittees, I'm on board for that. We could start what the tools we have to look at some of the things we've been hearing about, 8 can't wait, things like that, to have our voice while those discussions are happening, because they're happening now. So if we can get some subcommittees organized, I'm ready to help and step up to do that work with my fellow board members. So I've got some ideas about how, when we talk about access, there's a lot of things we could do. And it'll be everything from Q&As, brochures, seeing if we can have the complaint form be available for non-English speakers. I mean, there's so many things that we could do to kind of like take full advantage of the tools that we do have within our grasp through the existing ordinance. So we could think through that and see if staff can help us, city staff can help us to make it even more accessible just with what we have. So those are sort of my ideas, at least to get started on these subcommittees, even if it's just some initial steps, setting them up, figuring out what our top priorities would be for which policies to look at.
Okay, thank you. So I'm envisioning a meeting in September, and I'm thinking, would we want to have a hearing before that date? Not a hearing, but an open an open, I'm sorry, you got me on here, an open hearing, an open forum to hear back from the public as well. What are your thoughts? Jane?
Jane Gibson, board member. I wonder if we could wait until after we've heard back from Toni Wheeler to know when we're ready for that.
Okay, fair enough. Do we want to have a September meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, I do too. I just want to make sure and affirm that. Okay, so the doodle poll will go out, Brandon? Okay.
Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. That is correct.
Okay, and Brandon, with regard to the COMA, what about soliciting agenda items from board members? What's the best way to do that?
This is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. So Toni, are you asking about if board members have ideas for agenda items, how they can get those placed on an agenda?
Yes.
This is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. So I will be crafting the agendas, going through the mechanics of that in our software system that we use to put those together and publish them and distribute them. So you are the chair, and as the chair, I think you certainly have the right to review the agenda and make decisions about what items and in what order the items should be placed on the agenda. That being said, I'm perfectly happy to accept any items from any board members and put those maybe in a draft agenda, and then you and me can touch base prior to publication of the agenda and make sure that you're comfortable with that. And then any future person serving in the position of chair, I would do the same with.
Okay, good to know. So if there are any agenda items that you want to start generating for future meetings, if you'll send them to Brandon, and then I'll work that out with you, Brandon. Correct?
Brandon McGuire, Assistant Manager. That is correct. In one other thought that I've had, we could adopt a practice that we've used with the City Commission and their agendas, and have sort of a placeholder memo. So if we get too many items to address in one meeting, we would have a placeholder memo, and we would be able to use that to keep track of future agenda items.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, any other discussion, conversations, etc.? Sanjay? Stephanie?
I know in the interest of time, I don't know how long we want to be. What the purpose of this meeting also was beyond looking at the draft. Are there any updates on the consultant coming through? We cannot ask that question today.
This is Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. The consultant submissions, the proposals will be received by next Monday, the 17th. And so we have been working, our city management intern, Andrew Davis, has been helping me to make invitations to several community members. And we are putting together a community interview panel, and that will be in addition to our staff selection committee, so that we can gain diverse input on the selection process and make sure that we have a consultant that we present to the city commission for a final recommendation on a contract that at least a broad segment of our community does feel good about. And so I'm certainly happy to share an update. I think maybe the August 27th meeting would be a good time for me to submit a memo and provide a status update on that selection process. But there will be quite a bit of work that goes on between now and that meeting in terms of getting down to a short list of consultants that we would consider advancing through an interview process.
I asked if Sanjay Mishra, again, board member, because because initially when you requested the 3 members from this board come, the space for 3 members on this board for the citizens review panel, and we were so short-handed that only 2 of those spots were taken. So are you still open to a 3rd spot for this board?
Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager, absolutely. If anybody is available. And
Marie, Jenny, you want to, they are hiring a consultant to review the functioning of the police department and make recommendations, right? Is that a fair statement?
Fair statement.
Yes, so if either of you want to get on board.
Marie Taylor, assistant. Oh my gosh, what did I just say? Marie Taylor, board member. Okay. I will contact Brandon to find out about that schedule and more information.
And Jenny, you too?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I was nodding. Yep.
All right. Just want to make sure. Jane?
I'll defer to Stephanie.
Stephanie?
Stephanie Littleton, board member. I just don't want to go without saying that I'm excited that we have great new energy on this board, and I don't want to let that go too easily because we really do need to move forward with subcommittees. So, and I'm sure that Marie's probably already making a list of what she's going to send to Brandon. So I'm excited about that. So I just wanted to comment on that because we've been trying to get that moving along, you know, in several subcommittees. So thank you so much.
Jane?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say with the, an addition here. When we first became a board, we didn't know how to get things done. We didn't understand exactly what the protocols are, and we're still learning. You know, we have a lot to learn here because we're new. And so when we wanted to create this working group to revise the ordinance, you know, I mean, we had to figure out how do you create a working group, you know, with the restrictions on the ways that we communicate and all of that. So I just wanted to say and encourage Marie, if you would like to organize a working group around one of the categories. Stephanie, you weren't here in one of the earlier meetings when Stephanie had identified, you know, the kinds of things that she saw we needed additional board members to do. If there's one that, you know, you really have your head and heart wrapped around, I would urge you to say so tonight and invite people to work with you on it. And we can make a motion and vote on the working group that can be working simultaneously while we're trying to get this ordinance together. There's no reason why they couldn't happen at the same time. And you have energy and you have ideas and experience, and I don't want that to go to waste because we failed to take you up on your offer here. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Jane.
Marie Taylor, board member. I look forward to working with all of you. So I just don't, I think there's protocols that we have to follow because of the posting about actually starting a group. So I think we'll have to we'll put it for that future meet. I'll have to send it to Brandon, I guess. We're going to get started. We're going to get started on a lot of great opportunities here to make some change.
Okay, but you're not out of line if you want to try to recruit to a working group. That's all I'm saying. You don't have to do that through Brandon. We're here to collectively before the public, which means we can say whatever we want to say here, right? Because now we're in compliance.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Toni?
Toni, you are muted.
Sorry. Toni Wheeler, City Attorney. I just sent out a message. I am really impressed by this board's attentiveness to the Kansas Open Meetings Act. And I really appreciate your dedication to transparency. I really thank you for that as the City Attorney. And
thank you.
And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, any other Stephanie.
I know we all need to close this. This is Stephanie.
No.
I just want to make one last comment because we've been really kind of not meaning to be standoffish with the city and especially Toni Wheeler now that she's present in our meetings. But what an addition. So thank you, Toni. We really appreciate and we look forward to the partnership. It's so critical. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Toni. Thank you, Brandon, too. Appreciate it. All you've done and all you will be working with us on. We appreciate it.
And Trent, of course.
Oh, yes, of course, Trent and Sergeant Ernst. Okay. Anything else? I guess we need one motion for the evening. Sanjay?
Adjourned, is that what you wanted?
Yeah.
Sanjay Mishra, board member, I move the motion to adjourn.
I second that.
And that's Stephanie Littleton seconding it?
Yes, Stephanie Littleton.
All right. All those in favor, we'll go around the room, the Zoom room. Marie? All those in favor, yay?
Yay.
Yeah. Jenny?
Yay.
Jane? Aye. Bill?
Yeah.
Stephanie?
Yay.
And Sanjay?
Yay.
Okay, the motion passes with 7. I'll vote too. Yes, 7 yays. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Good evening.
27.